My name is Marissa Quinn, and I'm 18 years old. People think silence in a house means peace, but they're wrong. There's a kind of silence that isn't calm at all. It's hollow. It echoes in the walls and in your chest until you feel like you could scream and nobody would turn their head. That's the silence I grew up in. I was the middle child, which in my family might as well have been code for optional. My older sister Lena was the golden one, varsity cheerleader, straight teeth, hair always shining in the spotlight my parents held up for her. My younger sister Erin was the baby, the one who could spill milk on the carpet and still get a kiss on the forehead because she's just little. And then there was me, the girl who had to figure things out alone, the one nobody noticed had stopped asking for help. When I was 12, I thought maybe good grades would earn me attention. So I got straight A's. Nothing. When I kept my room spotless, helped fold laundry without being asked, cooked dinner when mom came home late, I thought maybe then I'd hear a "thanks, Marissa," or even a small "we're proud of you." It never came. But Lena got flowers for making varsity. Erin got a brand new Xbox for bringing home a report card with nothing higher than a C. And me? I got silence. Always silence. Birthdays came and went. Some years there was a card. Some years, not even that. When I turned 16, they said it slipped their minds because things were hectic. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone, waiting for a single message. It never came. It wasn't loud neglect. No screaming, no slamming doors. Just a steady drip of indifference that felt heavier than yelling ever could. I cooked my own meals, washed my own clothes, took the bus to school. At some point, I realized I could probably disappear for days, and they wouldn't notice. That thought didn't even make me sad anymore. It made me curious. So I decided to test it. When I turned 18, I didn't say a word. No party, no cake request, no reminder. I just waited. At breakfast? Nothing. At dinner? Still nothing. Not even a passing happy birthday. They didn't remember at all. That night, I zipped a bag closed. Inside was every dollar I had saved from working part-time at the bookstore down the street. Not much. Barely enough for a few weeks of rent, but it was enough for an exit. I didn't slam the door. I didn't even leave a note. I just walked out. And you know what? No one called that night. Not the next day. Not for weeks. At first, I checked my phone compulsively. I thought maybe they were waiting for the right time, or maybe they assumed I was sleeping over at a friend's. But the days stretched into weeks. The silence never changed. They didn't notice. And somehow, that didn't break me. It freed me. Because if I could disappear so easily, then maybe I had never really belonged to them in the first place. So I made myself a promise that night. If they weren't going to check in on me, I wouldn't go back. The first weeks on my own weren't glamorous, but they were mine. I moved into a cramped apartment with a guy named Raphael, a friend of a friend, who needed a roommate. The floors creaked, the ceiling had brown water stains, and the heater coughed like it was on its last breath. But the silence there was different. Not suffocating. Not hollow. It was the good kind, the kind where I could finally hear myself think. I got a job at a diner 2 blocks away. Morning shifts, waiting tables, then evenings flipping burgers when someone called out. Greasy, chaotic, loud, but I liked it. For once, effort meant something. No one knew my family. No one measured me against Lena or spoiled Erin. They only cared if I showed up, worked hard, and cleaned up after myself. For the first time in my life, that was enough. That fall, I enrolled in community college. Financial aid covered part, and the rest I paid with diner tips, weekend shifts, and too many meals of canned soup. Exhausting, yes, but for the first time, I felt a purpose humming in my chest. I didn't tell anyone about my family. When people asked where I was from, I let them assume. Some guessed I was fostered or aged out of the system. Others thought I'd been kicked out. I let them believe it. The truth that I had parents who simply forgot I existed was harder to explain. Every now and then, something pulled me back for a moment. A mother hugging her son at the bus stop. A father helping his daughter carry groceries. And for just a second, I'd feel that sting, like I'd been robbed of something everyone else got for free. But then I'd remember how long it had been since I left. No one ever came looking. No call, no text, nothing. And that just confirmed what I already knew. I didn't leave them. They let me go. And that's when my story really began. The first morning I woke up away from home, I didn't know where I was. Light leaked through a crooked blind, dragging a slanted bar across the ceiling. I lay there listening, no clinking dishes, no TV murmuring from a distant room, no footsteps pacing past my door. Just a radiator coughing itself awake and the hum of traffic 3 floors down. The silence pressed around me, and for a heartbeat, I braced for the old feeling. The hollow one. It didn't come. This silence was rough around the edges, but it belonged to me. Raphael knocked once and cracked the door. "Hey, roommate, you still alive?" "Barely," I muttered, pushing up on my elbows. He grinned. "Coffee's a miracle worker. I made some. Ignore the mug with the chipped lip. Or don't. We're not fancy here." We weren't. The apartment sagged in corners and kept secrets in the paint. Brown water stains, shaped like continents. A patch of wallpaper that peeled like sunburn. A window that stuck stubbornly in the winter. But it had a lock I held the key to, and a front door that only opened when I wanted it to. I carried my toothbrush to the narrow bathroom, breathing in the faint scent of cheap vanilla soap and floor cleaner. In the mirror, I looked like someone midway through a transformation. Hair knotted, eyes tired, a sigh caught behind my ribs. But there was something else, too. A quiet I recognized as mine. The diner 2 blocks down hired me the same afternoon I asked. They didn't care where I was from or why my references were light. They cared that I could move fast, smile through the rush, and lift a heavy tub of iced tea without spilling. On my first morning shift, I met the cook, a woman with shoulders like a linebacker and soft eyes that missed nothing. Her name was Bunny, which didn't match her at all in the best possible way. "Rule 1, she said, flipping bacon like pages in a book. "You talk to table 13 like they're your favorite cousins. They tip like they've forgiven you for something." She jabbed her spatula toward the corner booth. "Rule 2, don't let the toast burn or Gus will set your paycheck on fire." "Gus?" I asked. The owner emerged from the back with a ledger under his arm and a pencil behind his ear, as if summoned by his name. "Toast is sacred," he said without looking up, "and so are numbers." I learned to plate eggs without smearing the yolks, to keep the coffee cups topped and the stories short, to sweep my own station at the end of a shift like it was a little cathedral I got to tend. I smelled like the friar for months, and my shoes lived in a permanent shallow river of mop water, but it felt like a trade I could live with. Effort in, effort out. No invisible scorekeeping. No, we'll remember this later. At night, I collapsed onto the futon I'd bought off a classified Zap for $40, listening to Raphael's soft guitar on the other side of the thin wall. He wasn't a talker, thank God, but he loved small kindnesses. A clean mug left upside down to dry. A note on the fridge. "I ate your leftover fries. I'll buy you extra tomorrow." In that apartment, no one apologized for taking up space. We just learned to share it. I started community college that fall. The campus was a collection of low-slung buildings and determined people. Everyone there was juggling something. A second job, a baby carrier, a midlife career pivot. In a place like that, showing up mattered more than showing off. I signed up for Intro Comp Sci and Statistics, plus a general ed class that met at 8 a.m. in a windowless room that smelled like old carpets and peppermints. I kept a notebook for each class, neat handwriting I didn't show anyone, and a calendar app color-coded like a stained glass window. On payday, I stood in line at the bursar's office and paid what I could. Financial aid covered part. The rest came from my pockets and the tip jar. There were nights when the exhaustion pressed me flat. I'd shuffle home after a double shift to an inbox full of assignment notifications and email reminders, and I'd stare at the ceiling for 5 minutes to bargain with time. Then I'd sit up, tie my hair back, and write 1 paragraph. 1 line of code. 1 solved equation. 1 more small step away from where I started. It wasn't pretty, but it counted. I met Mel in the library, hovering over a recording mic like it might bite. She ran the campus podcast and had a voice made of late-night radio, low, curious, always on the edge of a laugh. "Do you know anything about audio interfaces?" she asked me, squinting at a tangle of cords. "A little," I said. I knew more than a little, but I'd learned not to oversell. We spent the next hour detangling both the cables and the problem. When the sound finally piped in clean and warm, Mel threw her arms up like we'd landed a plane. "I'm Mel," she said, offering a hand. "You're my hero." "Marissa," I said. The word hero stuck in my throat. I'd never been anyone's hero. A decent server, maybe. A quiet shadow. A girl who washed her own clothes. Come by the studio sometime, Mel added. We bribe helpers with vending machine snacks. I met Drew in Computer Lab B, where the fluorescent lights hummed like anxious bees. He could make anything run with duct tape, a bent paperclip, and a Red Bull. Printers, a sputter-prone 3D scanner, the professor's patience. He was the first person who taught me that most systems were half improvisation anyway. Everyone pretends it's all designed and solid, he said, propping open a server cabinet with a stack of textbooks. But most of the world is held together with temporary solutions we keep calling permanent. He said it like a joke, and also like a map. At the diner one Tuesday, I left with an extra slice of apple pie wrapped in wax paper. Take it, Bunny insisted. Consider it your fruits and vegetables. I carried it home like a secret. Raphael was out, the apartment quiet but for the heaters ticking. I set the pie on the counter and saw a post-it stuck to the cupboard door. You got this. R. I don't know why it hit me so hard, just 3 messy words, but I stood there crying over a slice of pie that wasn't even warm anymore. Sometimes the universe hands you a hand on your shoulder. Sometimes it's just a note in a kitchen. There were moments when the old ache flared. A mother stooping to tie a little girl's shoe by the bus stop. A father at the grocery store counting cash and still picking up the name brand cereal because his kid glowed just looking at the box. I found myself staring and then stopping, pulling my gaze back like a hand from a hot stove. I didn't want to be the kind of person who resented tenderness just because it skipped me. I wanted to be the kind of person who could recognize it and then make some of my own. I kept my past soft and blurry when people asked. We don't talk, I'd say of my family, and that was usually enough. In the spaces where others might have shared holiday stories, I learned to tell jokes about the diner rush and Bunny's sermon on toast. I learned to ask better questions than the ones I hoped no one would ask me. Where are you from? Why did you leave? Did you try to fix it? People love to audit other people's grief, like it's a budget they can balance. I chose not to give them the numbers. It wasn't all work, though it felt like it most days. Somewhere between lab hours and refilling syrup pitchers, I kept seeing a guy at the library's tech desk whose patience with confused patrons bordered on saintly. He was a year ahead of me and always wore the same battered watch, silver face, dulled by years of small knocks. When printers jammed or logins failed, he didn't sigh or lecture. He leaned in and asked, "What were you trying to do? Let's do that together." His name was Lucas. I didn't know much about him then, only that he had a way of listening that made you feel less ridiculous for needing help. I wasn't ready for anything, but sometimes our eyes caught, and I looked away first. Fall tilted into winter, and the apartment learned new tricks. Cold snuck under the window, so we stuffed old towels along the sill. The heater developed a personality, louder but reliable. I found mittens at a thrift store for $1 and discovered the joy of pockets deep enough to hide your whole life. Raphael and I learned to split groceries like a couple that wasn't, arguing over cereals with mock seriousness and quietly swapping each other's favorites into the cart anyway. At night, after closing the diner, I'd walk home with my earbuds in. The city looked different in the cold, the air sharper, the streetlights like accidental stars. Sometimes I imagine my parents' house at that same hour, a TV left on, dishes drying in a rack, a hallway light glowing to guide people who never noticed I'd stopped walking those floors. I wondered if they ever paused and felt the shape of me missing. The answer slid through me as gently as the air. If they had, I didn't owe that ache anything. Not my return, not my apology for leaving without a final performance of gratitude, not my willingness to play glue for a family that let me dissolve. Still, the human heart is a messy animal. On my bus rides, I'd catch my reflection in the dark window and try to imagine what I'd say if my mother called. I crafted impossible conversations where she admitted the things that weren't mistakes, but choices. The way she looked past me, the unlit candles on birthdays, the empty chair they called mine on holidays I didn't attend. In those imagined calls, I was calm, she was contrite, and when the bus jerked and the doors sighed open, the fantasy dissolved like breath. Then came midterms, and the kind of bone-deep tired that makes everything funny after midnight. I aced the stats exam and barely scraped through a comp lab because the computers crashed 10 minutes into the test. Drew resurrected them like a sorcerer, but not in time to save my missing paragraphs. Bunny slid me a celebratory pancake before my shift and told me to tell the world to look out. "You're a quiet freight train," she said. "By the time they notice you, you've already hauled yourself across the country." I thought about that on a Sunday night, seated cross-legged on my futon with a half-finished essay and a playlist humming low. I thought about being a quiet freight train and how that sounded less like loneliness and more like momentum. I no longer waited for applause or permission. My victories were small and private: paid bills, a clean assignment submission, a kindly word from someone who wasn't related to me and therefore owed me nothing. The old silence had been a verdict. The new silence felt like space. Before I turned in, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I froze, pulse rising. It was nothing, just a promotional message from the bus line. But for a breath, I tasted the future. Someday, maybe, a message would arrive that tried to pull me backward. I'd wondered what I would do if it happened. Standing barefoot on the cold floor, I pictured myself from above, a girl in an unglamorous apartment, a stubborn heater trying its best, a stack of notebooks like stepping stones, a life built piece by piece. "Tell me," I asked the empty room, "who do I become if I answer?" The radiator offered its old cough. I smiled despite myself. I turned off the light, slid under covers that smelled faintly of detergent and diner grease, and let the good silence fold over me. Whatever came next would find me moving, working, studying, reaching. Whatever reached back from the past would have to catch up to the train. Outside, the city exhaled. Inside, I slept. By the time I turned 20, I'd become someone my younger self wouldn't recognize. I'd finished my associate's degree, transferred to a 4-year university, and was juggling a part-time job at the campus library with a little freelance work on the side. The library job wasn't glamorous, resetting passwords, helping students who swore the printer hated them, but it paid steady, and I liked the rhythm of it. The freelance gigs were different. Building small websites for nonprofits or tinkering with donor dashboards. Work that mattered, even if no one knew my name. Most nights I came home tired, but the good kind of tired. The kind you feel when you know every hour spent brought you closer to something real. I shared dinners with Raphael when our schedules matched. Sometimes Lucas, yes, that same patient guy from the tech desk, walked me home after a late shift, his watch face glinting in the streetlight. He wasn't officially mine yet, but there was a comfort in his presence, like I didn't have to shrink to make space for him. It had been 2 full years since I left home, 2 birthdays unmarked, 2 Christmases ignored, 2 summers where I didn't receive so much as a postcard. And then one evening, as I was grading my own half-legible notes, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in forever. Dad Mobile. For a long second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I just stared at the glowing screen while my pulse thudded in my ears. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not after 2 years of silence. I watched it buzz until it stopped. Then came the voicemail. "Hey, it's me. Dad. We were just wondering how you've been. You haven't been around in a while. Mom's been asking. Anyway, call us back. All right." That was it. Stiff, flat, like he'd been rehearsing someone else's lines. There was no warmth, no sorry, no acknowledgement of the birthdays they'd missed, the dinners where my chair sat empty, and no one cared enough to ask where I'd gone. I didn't call back. I sat there instead, clutching my phone like it was a stranger knocking at my door, trying to sound familiar. Something in me stirred, a slow boil of anger, not the explosive kind, but the deep, bone-level kind. They hadn't even noticed I'd gone until now. Why now? 2 days later, another message lit my screen, this time from Lena. "Hey, Dad's been trying to get in touch. You should call him. It's important." That was all. No detail, no explanation. Just Lena, the sister who spent our childhood basking in applause, now delivering vague orders, like I owed them a response. I didn't reply. Instead, I scrolled through her profile. Holiday photos, coordinated outfits, Erin grinning beside my parents like she'd never missed me for a second. There they all were, smiling in matching sweaters, as though I'd been edited out of their story. And now they had the audacity to reach out? I set the phone down, but the thoughts kept circling. I didn't block them. I didn't need to. Their neglect had already erased me once. It was me who had rebuilt. Still, the question clung like smoke. What do they want? Because it wasn't me. It couldn't be. Not after 2 years of silence. That night, I dreamed of my old house. The front door swung open to reveal my seat at the dinner table, untouched, waiting. But when I stepped inside, the chair vanished. The others kept eating, laughing, clinking glasses. I called out, but no one turned. When I woke, my pillow was damp. 2 more days, another message, this time from my father again. A blurry photo of the old house, probably meant to tug at nostalgia. I didn't even open it before deleting it. If they thought the house could tether me, they didn't understand. That wasn't home anymore. I wasn't lost. I'd just stopped waiting to be found. Still, the unease lingered. Lucas noticed it before I said anything. We were walking across campus, snow crunching beneath our shoes, when he glanced sideways. "You've been quiet," he said softly. "Quieter than usual." "It's nothing," I started, then stopped. His expression was patient, open, the kind that didn't push, just waited. "My dad called," I finally admitted. "First time in 2 years." Lucas slowed his pace. "What did he say?" "That he wondered how I'd been." I gave a bitter laugh. "Like I just forgot to stop by for dinner one night." Lucas didn't comment. He just tucked his hands into his jacket and let me walk in silence until I spoke again. "I don't think they want me back," I whispered. "They want something else, and I don't know what it is yet." Snowflakes clung to my coat, melting into small, damp patches. I shoved my hands deeper into my pockets. For the first time since I'd left, I felt the old dread stirring, the one that said no matter how far I ran, their shadows would always find me. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to find out what they wanted. By Friday, the texts and calls had stacked up like unanswered letters. My dad's stiff voicemails, Lena's vague nudges, none of them said what mattered. No apology, no truth, just this sudden insistence that I had to show up now, after 2 years of silence. I didn't plan to reply at first, but curiosity gnawed at me. I wanted to see how far they'd go, how many half-hearted attempts they'd throw at me, before finally saying the words that actually counted. Except those words never came. Instead, my dad sent one more message. "We should talk. Just 1 hour, please." So I agreed, not because I wanted reconciliation, because I wanted clarity. I picked a cafe in the middle of town, neutral ground, public, quiet, no chance for dramatics. I even set a limit in the text, 1 hour. The day of the meeting, my stomach twisted like it wanted to crawl out of me. Lucas noticed as we crossed the library lobby that morning. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "I'm not sure at all," I admitted, "but I need to know what they're really after." He squeezed my hand once, steady. "Then make sure you leave with answers, not guilt." When I walked into the cafe that afternoon, the smell of roasted beans hit me hard, and my nerves spiked. I spotted him instantly. My dad looked older, like someone who had aged faster in the last 2 years than in the 10 before. His hair grayed at the edges. His shoulders slumped as though carrying a weight he couldn't name. I stayed seated, earbuds dangling around my neck, waiting. He hesitated when he saw me, torn between smiling and apologizing. He chose a thin smile. "Hey, Marissa," he said as he slid into the seat across from me. "You look good." I nodded but said nothing. He ordered a coffee. I didn't. I just folded my hands and waited. After a pause, he cleared his throat. "It's been a while." I raised one eyebrow, wordless. "We were surprised when you left," he continued. "You didn't say anything." The word surprised landed like a slap. Surprised. I had vanished 2 years ago, and they hadn't noticed until now. My silence must have shown on my face because he faltered. "We thought maybe you were staying with a friend," he added quickly. Then, the months passed, and it just got harder to reach out. That was their excuse, that I was gone and they chose not to try? He rambled on about how the house hadn't felt the same, how Lena had gotten busy, how Erin had missed me, in her own way. He strung together these fragments of memory like they proved something. But the one thing he didn't do, he didn't apologize. Finally, I cut in. "Why now?" His hand jerked slightly around his cup. "What do you mean? Why reach out after all this time? What changed?" He hesitated, then dropped his eyes. "Your grandmother passed away. The family's been strained. We're trying to reconnect." There it was. Not about me. Not about realizing how they'd hurt me. Just another crisis. And now they needed the forgotten daughter to glue things back together. I sat back, my chest heavy but clear. "I'm sorry about Grandma," I said quietly. "But I'm not the one you call when things fall apart. Not anymore." His mouth opened like he wanted to protest, maybe deliver some noble line to smooth it all over. But I was already rising from my chair. You didn't check in when I left, I said firmly. You didn't even ask if I was okay. So no, I'm not here for closure. I'm here to make it clear that I've moved on. The scrape of my chair echoed louder than it should have. I put on my jacket without looking back, walked past the counter where the barista steamed milk, and stepped into the cold afternoon air. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel triumphant. What I felt was something I'd been chasing for years: certainty. For once, I didn't need his validation. I already knew where I stood, and that scared me less than the thought of going back. The next morning, my phone buzzed before I even rolled out of bed. A text from Dad. We should have handled things differently. Your mom wants to see you too. I stared at the screen, half expecting my chest to tighten. Instead, I felt oddly still. They hadn't said sorry. They hadn't even acknowledged the years I spent invisible under their roof. Just another vague message meant to tug me back into orbit. An hour later, Lena chimed in. Dad's hurt. You didn't have to be so cold. Cold. That word almost made me laugh. I'd spent my entire childhood setting myself on fire just to keep that family warm. I gave them chances, smiles, effort, patience, things I never got in return. And now, when I finally stopped handing over pieces of myself, suddenly I was cold. No, I wasn't cold. I was done. That night, I sat at my desk, laptop glowing faintly against the dark. After rereading their messages, I typed out just one reply. I hope you and Mom are well. I've created a life I'm proud of. I'm not interested in reopening old wounds. Please respect that. I read it 3 times, then hit send. No paragraphs explaining my pain. No list of their failures. Just boundaries. Simple, clear, final. When I powered off my phone, the silence that followed didn't feel heavy. It felt like peace. I spent the weekend leaning into that peace. Lucas came over with groceries he insisted on carrying himself, even though the bag nearly ripped. You didn't have to buy all this, I told him as he unpacked eggs, noodles, and a bottle of cheap red wine. Didn't have to, he said, smiling. Wanted to. We cooked together in Raphael's crooked little kitchen, our elbows bumping in the small space. Lucas chopped vegetables with precise patience while I stirred a sauce that kept threatening to boil over. At one point, he reached over and brushed a smudge of tomato off my cheek with his thumb. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. It wasn't glamorous. Cheap pasta, chipped bowls, heater clanking like it was trying to interrupt us. But it was real, and it was mine. After dinner, Raphael wandered in with his guitar, playing soft chords while Lucas and I washed dishes shoulder to shoulder. The room felt full, not with noise, but with something warmer, the kind of fullness I'd never felt in my parents' house. Later that night, lying awake on my futon, I thought about the 2 silences I'd known. The old silence had been punishment, an empty space where love should have been. The new silence was freedom, a space I could fill with my own choices, my own people, my own worth. And I knew then, whatever my family tried next, I wasn't going back. Weeks passed. The calls tapered off, then stopped completely. No more voicemails from Dad, no more cryptic texts from Lena. At first, the quiet unsettled me, like waiting for thunder after lightning. But the storm never came. And slowly I realized I didn't miss the noise. For the first time in my life, silence wasn't punishment. It was relief. My days settled into a rhythm: morning coffee with Raphael's guitar strumming in the background, classes at the university, late-night coding session for nonprofit clients, and evenings with Lucas. Sometimes he'd walk me home after his shift at the library, his battered watch catching the glow of the streetlights. We'd talk about everything from the future of AI to the perfect way to boil noodles, and somehow it always felt like more than small talk. One night, sitting on the fire escape with Lucas beside me, I found myself saying out loud what I'd been holding inside. I used to think I needed an apology to move on, I confessed. That if they ever said the right words, if they admitted they were wrong, then maybe I'd finally heal. Lucas didn't interrupt, he just listened, patient as always. But I get it now, I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. Healing doesn't always come from closure. Sometimes it comes from choosing not to explain yourself anymore, from investing in a future that doesn't need their approval. He nodded slowly, then said, "Sounds like you've already chosen." And he was right. I began to see the difference everywhere. Back then, every small act in my family carried strings. A ride home meant I owed them later. A meal cooked meant I had to be extra grateful. A single favor could be twisted into lifelong debt. Now, kindness came without price tags. Mel handed me snacks from the vending machine when I studied late in the podcast booth. Drew fixed my laptop fan with duct tape and a grin. Lucas showed up because he wanted to, not because he needed me to fill a space in some family script. I didn't talk about my parents much. When people asked, I kept it simple. We don't talk. Most didn't pry, and the ones who did, I learned to give them a look that made the questions shrink back into their throats. One afternoon, I did get a message from a cousin I hadn't seen since high school. "Hope you're doing well," it said. I replied politely but briefly, then set my phone down without a second thought. For once, I didn't feel the pull of old obligations. Their orbit no longer held me. Sometimes late at night, I'd wonder what my life might have looked like if I'd grown up in a family that actually saw me. A mother who noticed my birthdays. A father who asked how I was doing. Sisters who didn't treat me like background noise. But then I'd look at where I was now. A warm kitchen with laughter spilling in, a degree within reach, a life I was building with my own hands. I wasn't defined by what I didn't get. I was shaped by what I built anyway. And what I built was enough. Every so often, I'd catch sight of Lena's social media, another family dinner, another holiday photo. I didn't feel anger anymore. Not even bitterness, just distance. Like watching strangers from a train window, blurry and fading with each passing mile. Because the truth was simple, I didn't walk away to hurt them. I walked away because I deserved better than being forgotten. And I found it. Not in some perfect new family, not in a dramatic reunion, but in the decision to stop waiting. In the choice to live, really live, without looking back. That night, I stood by my apartment window, the city lights stretching beneath me, like a constellation only I could read. The heater clicked softly, Raphael strummed a tune in the other room, and Lucas's laughter still lingered in my ears. For the first time in forever, I felt whole. And in that quiet, I knew I hadn't been lost. I had finally been found by myself.